Welcome to the Historians. So this is a playthrough of my digital version of the game. My goal here is to try and give you a sort of sense as to what the various different game mechanics are like. This is, of course, the digital version, but I have to stress there's very little difference rules-wise between the digital version and the physical version. In fact, I've tried to make it a one-on-one parity across the board. The main difference is, of course, you're interacting with an UI system that has certain key components that are summarized, whereas when we get to the physical version of the game, a lot of that is more obviously physical and tactile. Where do we start? We're year one. I've just been hired as a visiting assistant professor. My goal is, of course, to try and become more than that, right? And so, as part of that process, let's see what evidence I currently have in my hand. I have, okay, Boston Massacre article from a testimony from an individual who's definitely colonial, definitely saying that the soldiers cried for fire. The next one is a House of Burgesses document. It's definitely a colonial perspective, definitely political as well, talking about dearest rights from destruction by the heavy hand of power. Yeah, definitely political. And then we have if the British Parliament has a legal authority. Oh, yeah, definitely political. John Dickinson, yeah. Not really unified, so I would not be able to get a times 2 bonus for matching key component parts of it. So let's see what happens when I draw 3 more cards. I'm going to spend the first year trying to draw 3 more cards to see what ultimately I have access to. Okay, Boston Tea Party. Not helpful, but again, integral part of this whole process, right? Sons of Liberty, an advertisement pushing for individuals to not be taxed. Yeah. And Thomas Preston. Now, this is, of course, Boston Massacre. So we do have 3 Boston Massacre pieces. We have at least 2. Yeah, we have 2 Boston Massacre pieces. So we could build a social argument utilizing them, which let's see what happens when we do. So we want to say that it's actually a war about the people, right? That in effect, what we're saying is that the war as a whole is a war being fought by individuals who have vested interests in their communities. Let's see what happens. Success. So here it walks us through it. Obviously, we have a colonialist perspective and a British perspective. And what's particularly interesting, right, it was only a base 10 points, right? Because it's a very small article that we wrote. But because it's all about the same thing, the Boston Massacre, it doubles it, right? It shares that sort of continuity bonus. Fantastic. And now we get a reward. Now, looking at this page, you can see that we can upgrade a number of key component parts, what I call your stats, right? Your player stats. These stats help you work and research and develop your own sort of vision of what the historical field should feel like, right? In the physical version, you'll have something similar to this, right? It's a player mat where you keep tokens on it to try and keep track of what you're dealing with. You all start at level 1 within research funding, personal archive, professional memberships, literary agent, and publicist. What those stats effectively mean is that you are already trained to be a historian. The question is, what kind of historian are you going to be? To go back to the actual game, this one sort of goes into detail, right? Research funding, if you have more money, you can get more archive materials, right? So you can invest your funding into the research funding. Once you take an action to draw cards, you're just going to draw more cards. You can also invest in a personal archive, which, if you remember, is represented by like a hard drive. But the idea is that you have the ability to hold a lot more cards in your hand over time and not necessarily commit them to an argument. Literary agent. This is interesting. This is definitely, I tried to build 2 distinct tracks for scoring victory points. The literary agent track is where you publish a lot. And because you're publishing a lot, you're going to ultimately get a significant number of victory points per publish, right? What the literary agent does is they essentially go out and they promote the books that you put out, right? Or the articles. And what's interesting about the literary agent is it adds +1 for every piece of evidence that you put into a publication, which is a lot. But it doesn't make publishing easier, right? It just rewards you more on what you end up publishing. Workspaces is interesting because what you're doing here is you're starting to juggle multiple projects. And while that seems problematic, it's another way to expand your hand limit. The problem is once you put a card into the project, it's locked on the project board. You can only shift them between the various different projects. You can never pull it back into your hand. So you're committing it to a piece of evidence that you're going to end up working on. The association memberships is fascinating because that is the second route to victory, right? And using the association memberships track, what you're doing is you're networking, right? You're shaping your hand. Your publications, when you do publish, are going to be far more powerful because you're definitely sculpting your hand over time. And at the end of the game, you should also probably get a publicist because every time you go to those conferences in order to work, you get citations. And at the end of the game, those citations are only as valuable as you are, right? So over the course of the game, you want your publicist working hard to try and promote you as a scholar. So I'm going to go boring for this particular video, and I'm going to just go research funding. More cards, more capacity. So I have a colonial perspective and a colonial perspective. And a colonial perspective. Wow, all of these are colonial perspectives. So I'm going to see if I can build a book next year built on the colonial perspective, right? Let's see what else we get. So see, I could draw 5 cards, but again, I'm limited because I only have a 7 card hand limit. So I have to devote these to the text in order to try and materialize more space in my hand. So here we have a native perspective. Native American, the English, French, and Spain are all at war. The red people is to be at peace. Britain hardens its stance. Okay, so this is a British perspective on the Boston Tea Party. Fascinating. This is a British perspective on Boston's actions, right? This is the act that was passed to punish Boston for being so rebellious. Boston shopkeeper. If traffic is prohibited, so this is a response to that very specific act. He's arguing that it's going to ultimately end up ruining our economy. And then Sarah Lee Bradley Fulton. Now, this is a reference to the Boston Tea Party and how it shaped the nature of this key moment. Now, here's an interesting part, right? So, I do have at least 2 documents for the Boston Tea Party. I could contribute those to this document. I could have contributed it to a specific document if I had like project number 2. I could have built an argument around the Boston Tea Party. But I do not have that. So instead, I'm going to commit these 2 cards and stick with the colonial perspective, right? Then we're going to see. Let's see. What? Hey, I published a book. Now, when you publish a book, the first book you publish, you end up getting the associate professor rank, right? You get ranked up, you're now hired on, and this is it, right? So again, this is what the peer reviewers saw whenever they looked at the cards and evaluated it. Now in the solo version, you are your own peer reviewer. You flip over the cards, you see the tags, either they match or they don't, right? There's no real social interaction here. But again, it all matches. It's all good. And we can hit continue career. I'm now at 22. Now, here's the larger question. Okay, I don't want more research funding. I'm already having problems handling all the cards that are in my hand. So instead, I'm going to go for the literary agent. I only have 3 more turns. And so I need to try and build an interesting argument. Oh, yeah, I should say this. So these are British perspectives, right? And so my vision is I've done a lot of work for the colonialist perspective. Now I kind of want to work with the British perspective at this point. And so I'm going to try and build an argument around the British perspective. It's going to be complicated because, as you can see, if you look at these document conclusions, you'll notice British perspective is about middling in terms of number of sources in the archive. Obviously, the colonialist perspective tags are the most numerous. But let's see. Guarding against the crown. Hey, this is Captain Thomas Preston. Definitely could have put that in there. Again, what's fascinating is if I had left all of those Boston Massacre tagged to cards, I could have built an entire research project out of those. But again, can't really do that, right? You got to navigate the limitations of what your economic sources can fund. This is a loyalist perspective. This is John McEvers. So this is another British perspective. This will work in that argument that I'm building. John Adams is not a loyalist, obviously, so cannot use him. And of course, this Boston Town Meeting, trying to talk about what's going on with all these acts that are targeting Boston. That really doesn't work either. Okay, so now that we have all of this, I'm going to go ahead, add this project, and add this to the project. There we go. Again, John Adams does not. And so there we have it, right? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, all built around a British perspective. Now, it's going to be worth more cards, more points, because the conclusion is worth more points, but it's not going to get nearly as much because there's not as much evidence. So it's an interesting balancing act. There we go, 24 points. And again, all of them support the thesis. Everything goes forward, right? And again, what made it so much more valuable is the fact that when I published, I had +1 card for every, +1 point for every card. So that's why it looked so much more valuable. I'm going to keep going up that literary agent. So here's the thing. I've done a lot of arguments where I'm very clearly demonstrating success. I designed the game, so obviously I know this. I know this history fairly well. One of the interesting things about this process is I've learned more about the American Revolution and the nuances as I built this game and keep playing it, right? It's starting to really just start to lodge into my mind. That I'm in a situation where I want to build a new argument, but this time I want to purposefully fail. I want you to see what the fail state looks like and what we can do with regard to it. This is a Patriot perspective. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these 3 into here. And I'm going to call it a British perspective. Again, I obviously know that this is not a British perspective, but I want you to see what ultimately happens when you try to publish it. Boom. It says, well, revisions are required. You don't seem to have the evidence to support this conclusion. And that's interesting. The digital version will tell you, hey, this is what you should think about. But obviously, I'm trying to simulate this process. But in person, when you play the physical version, what you're looking at here is you start to see, oh, you know what? Those are all colonialist perspectives. I messed up. At which point you click continue your career. You don't get an upgrade because, again, you didn't have a matching argument. And at which point you can say, okay, look, this is it. Now, this is my last year. So when you click submit, boom, you get the score, and then hit continue career, and bam, you're at 79 points, final prestige. And then you retire, right? And it gives you a nice little stat. Just as an aside, I use this a lot in my class as a study guide. I've created purposeful decks around like early American history, modern American history, and things like that, so that students can help to learn the history and how different historical events have functioned. And so on my main site, this is a spawn site so that I could show you a more simplified, clear vision. They have a lot of final standings. I have a lot of students who have already competed with this and worked with it and done a lot of good materials. But yeah, but they can also go into a playtest report, but this is one of the things that I really love. They can download, and you can download all of your publications. The digital version allows me to do this. Obviously, in person, you can't really do this, but with the cards themselves. But yeah, it's a good study guide, right? You can start to see all the different arguments that you put forward and how they supported your successful win, right? Yeah. So that's that. I hope you enjoy this. I'd love to see you play the game. If you need an invitation, send me an email. I'll definitely see what I can do. Okay. Thank you.